and welcome to Don't Die Before You're Dead. I am your host, Mary McCartney, and this is where we talk about all things related to living the life that you are meant to live. What does that look like? Well, you know as well as I do that it's very different for many people. As you know, I am a widow and I am of senior vintage. So my life lived right now is heading into a direction that other people will not. And that's why I've invited my guest, Ronnie Littlewood, to come join today. She is the owner and founder of the Couples Clinic. She is a relationship expert. And right now I don't have one, but that doesn't mean that'll always be the same. But I'm thinking the beginning of the year, as we start out, couldn't all of us do a little with a little bit of extra help figuring out what happens if you want to go left and your significant other wants to go right? Or, how do you kind of mesh things? Have things become a little dull and you need a little bit more excitement? We all need some help along the way. Even people on their own. We have relationships with all kinds of people. So this is why I've invited Ronnie to come. And Ronnie, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the show this morning. I just can't wait to hear what you have to say to offer us maybe a bit of a new lease on life for the 2023. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited to talk to you, Mary. And yeah, 23, we're here. And unlike 2020, which we all kind of went in thinking we're all going to have like this supervision and, oh, did we get that wrong? 2023, I really think is about new beginnings and about changing our path and changing our destiny and really living the life that we're meant to live. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, I think we're so aligned, Ronnie, and I'm so glad you were able to come because, people do tend to get in ruts. Would you agree? It's
Absolutely.
easy.
Pain puts us in ruts for sure. And it's really hard to dig out of pain.
Well, I never thought of it that way. That's a good point. Is that what really is the heart of the matter? Is that what puts us into a rut? It's easier to run along the rut than it is to dig ourselves out. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, if it just even reflecting in my own experience, right? I come into this work maybe a little bit different, maybe than how most professionals come in. I came into love through pain. And sometimes I think the only way to get to love is to really walk through pain. And my pain started when I was little. I came from a really, really horrific childhood. It was very abusive. It was very toxic, very dysfunctional, and then kind of came into this world 18 with these eyes and not knowing and trying to like cope and deal with pain in the best ways that I knew how. And usually, like most people who struggle with enormous amount of pain, I didn't react well to it. There was fighting and denial and defensiveness and shut down and withdraw. And mostly, I think it was hating myself through that experience. And I don't think that that's much different than most people.
I can relate to what you're saying. I mean, mine wasn't the best either, and I ran away from home basically and got married to the first guy who looked at me twice, and I just thought that was my way out. But as you mentioned that, I mean, there's no real lessons on how to deal with it. There are a lot of things in life. I'm a retired teacher, and we teach a lot of things for sure, but there's a lot of things about just living our life that there is no real textbook on. And if you're not learning it from home, you have a childhood that doesn't allow you to see love in its full potential, then where do you learn it?
That's a good question. Part of my journey was going to school and watching what I thought was normal on TV. And I always say that the Cosby Show, that's what I thought family life was supposed to look like. And we all know what Bill Cosby was up to.
Well, the
So
Huxtables.
even that was a lie, right?
Right. Oh, for
Um,
sure.
and really this idea of that, I think you can't do the human experience without having pain. You can't. There's not literally, I don't think there's a single person who's ever come down to the blue marble who has not had some form of pain. But through this societal lens, there's this idea that there's shame in pain. And I'm
Mm.
like, that bothers me because if every human being has pain, why would we have shame about pain? And so I think that when I started to like click in that there is no shame in pain, and that instead of being embarrassed in my pain and ashamed of my pain and hating my pain, I was going to make a difference and I was going to turn in and I was going to start to learn to love my pain.
Mhm.
And when I learned how to love my pain and truly heal, like on a soul level, that's when I got on a mission that I need to start teaching others how to heal and stop hating themselves and hating their pain and loving themselves. Because when you start to love yourself and you release yourself from pain, then you are living the life that you want to live, right?
Mhm. Is you being the expert and all, I'm just guessing here. You talk about the shame. Is that connected to the guilt that sometimes we feel that it's all our fault, that we have experienced all of this pain for some of the wrongdoing that we ourselves have done, and we pick up the mantle of guilt, even though it might not be ours to wear?
100%, Mary. And for me, how I see guilt, because I have a very interesting relationship with guilt. We're good bedfellows. We've sat around that table talking many times. And what I've learned about guilt is it's self-punishment.
Mm.
I'm bad. I screwed up. I should have done this. I should have done that. And it's a perpetual punishment. And I'm like, and I've gotten to the point in my life is if I have pain, why would I punish my pain? Why would I do that? Do that to my kids. I'm a mother of four kids. My kids are in pain. I'm like, oh, you poor thing. And here you go. And how are you? And what can I do for you? I love their pain. As a parent, that was easy. But as a child, I wasn't taught that. Right.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
I grew up knowing that if I screwed up or I failed or I did something wrong, which, hello, I'm human. We're all going to screw up and fail. And that's part of life, that I would relentlessly punish myself and guilt myself for having been in that position. And I think, again, part of that message is not only the message of love, how to love others, but to make a decision and to stop hating my pain and punishing my pain, but to be gentle and compassionate and loving,
Like
because
we are with other people.
like we are with other people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, this is why the self-care, self-love is so important. It's been probably largely ignored for a long, long time, but I think now we're beginning to realize the importance of caring for ourselves before we can really be fully able to care for somebody else. So, dealing with our pain and getting to the place where basically we don't hold that guilt anymore. And there's probably a measure of forgiveness as well. Like you said, we're human, we forgive ourselves. But, we're talking about going into a relationship. If you're carrying all of that, I would imagine that has a huge impact on a relationship.
For sure, because I think a lot of us, and this doesn't matter what age you are. Although I do think that the younger people, the newer generation, are a tad bit better at this than we are. But if we're coming into a relationship where we are an empty cup, and I always say that love is energy, and love is energy we give away in words, touch, gifts, acts of service, and time. Nobody wants to give away energy because we're tired, we work too hard, we have too many kids and bills, and I just want to take the energy, because love is energy.
We don't have any left over to give.
We have nothing left over to give. So we go into these relationships, and especially when you see people who bounce in the same relationship, same relationship, they're like, why do I keep picking the same partner, Ronnie? You keep
Right.
picking the same partner, honey, because you're coming into these relationships as an empty cup. And yeah, it feels really good when they pour into you with their words or possibly even their toxicity, and you don't love yourself enough, you don't know how to fill your own cup. And so that is the such importance about self-love and self-care. It's not just about bubble baths and walks in nature. It's about profound holding yourself and knowing what your worth is and knowing what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept.
Okay. Am I hearing the differentiator between needing a person to be responsible for filling you up and making you feel better, as opposed to maybe wanting a relationship with someone so that you have more in your life, as opposed to having, I mean, that would be a drain on somebody else, but is it a difference between need and want?
100%. And then learning to recognize what your own needs and wants are versus how it makes me feel when just somebody else is giving it to me.
Hmm. That's a good point. That really is, because sometimes what we get kind of ambushes what we might need.
Absolutely. And I think there's certain people and they get caught in this same cycle in that, and it doesn't matter how old you are, is that if I spent my life never wholly confident, never willing to let my light shine and be beautiful regardless of my size or my face, and just willing to let people love me unconditionally, then I can love myself unconditionally. But the caveat with that, and this is the hard caveat, people, is that not everybody's going to love you. Some
Oh,
people are going to dislike you, and some people are going to find you annoying, and some people are going to reject you because you love yourself so much. And you have to love yourself enough to not give a crap, right?
yeah, yeah. Exactly. Not everybody's going to like us. That's a really good message, Ronnie, because sometimes we're just trying so hard to fit in, to be liked, to get our validation from other people. Even in a close-knit relationship, our validation can't really rely on that other person, because there are moments when they won't like you either, correct?
Absolutely. Like I follow this little grandma on TikTok. She's 92 and she's spicy as hell. I just
Oh,
love her. She'll say whatever she's thinking. And she'll be like, I'm 92 and I'm pretty and all my exes are dead and I'm famous. And I'm like, oh, I hope
her.
it does not take. I'm glad at 92 she found her voice and she found her worth. And
Yeah.
and she's speaking to a generation of teenagers and 20-year-olds. And I'm like, I hope there's more people who need to be spreading that message.
Yeah, I hope they're listening.
Me too.
There also has to be a bit of a balance now, as I'm getting on the vintage years, and I'm not 92. uh Hope to be there one day, absolutely, but there needs to be sort of that balance, because there are people that I've run into who love themselves to such an extreme. I think that's my own personal opinion, that they become almost intolerable. They become their own worst enemy, because there's an arrogance, there's an entitlement, there's just something that is just so me, 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 me.
Right. And
So
I guess
isn't balance important?
100%, but I think what we're talking about there is ego, right? And
Oh,
when people, and when I say ego, a lot of people automatically, because it's a term that has evolved over the years. And so the old ways we used to think about egos, oh, aren't they vain? Don't they have a big ego? Aren't they prideful?
yeah.
And it's funny because ego actually is a coping mechanism. It's a way to protect ourselves from pain. And when we see those people, those arrogants head up their butt, it's because they're so terrified of being vulnerable,
Mm,
of being in humility, of just being real, because that is courage, right? You have to be encouraged to be in love. And you're never going to be fully in love if you're stuck in ego, because then you're just in love with yourself. And love is energy you give away. And if you're just giving it to yourself, that ain't love, people.
oh no, I think they have a different word for that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about people who are in a relationship right now, and things, I mean, I don't know if it's age related. I would like to think not, but how they get in a rut, and they're kind of ho hum, and life is a little boring. And unfortunately, we're at a time when there's a lot of relationships, whether they're married or live together or whatever the situation, where the boredom sets in, and rather than try and figure out how to do something, there's a tendency just to call it a day. How do we kind of keep things going so that we're working towards a common goal of an enriched life for the both of them? Does that make
So
sense?
Oh, perfect, perfect. And very timely, Mary, because January is the month that most divorces are initiated in the month of January. So it is on a lot of people's minds, right?
Uh,
And it's because I feel lonely and hurt and alone and bored and you ain't filling my cup. But there is also, and I put it back to the person who's thinking those thoughts, okay? Yes, I can blame him, and I'm saying him because I find it's usually a lot more women who are initiating the divorces than the men, right? Men are more willing to sit in discomfort and just toe the line, right? Um, so I would ask those women, first of all, are you really meeting your own needs? Again, or are you expecting him? B, are you investing in other relationships outside of him? Do you have groups of friends? Are you doing things? But three, and most important, is it, it's biology, really. If I Let me explain it. I'll say it in a different way. So, in the old days, I used to work with people who had dementia, okay, Alzheimer's. And before the dementia really kind of grabbed them, they would have to work really hard at making their brain more full and growing the synaptic transmissions in their brain. And they would do this by playing Sudoku or doing puzzles or anything that was a challenge to them cognitively. And that kept them anchored here much longer and stopped that brain atrophy, decreased it a lot more. Well, I guess marriages can atrophy too, right? And so, just like that dementia patient, we have to do new things, different things with each other that sometimes is going to be uncomfortable. And you need to lead that in the relationship. And part of us doesn't want to lead in the relationship because I'm tired and it's always on me. And why do I have to? Well, guess what, sister? If you did it for 30 years or 40 years, yeah, you're going to probably do it till the very end. Okay. So you can be mad that you're doing it, but you've made a choice to lead this. So whether that's ballroom dancing, or we try pickleball, or we invite new friends, or let's try to make beef bourguignon together, because that's a horrible recipe. It takes like 4 hours, but tastes really good.
Let
So
me
it's
make cook.
so it's really about creating newness and
Uh-huh.
new memories and shared memories. And when we do that, we're going to always grow a little bit closer together.
Do you have any tips or suggestions for some compatibility of finding an activity or an event or something that they can enjoy together? Because sometimes that can be a challenge, and it kind of makes you wonder sometimes how on earth they got together when there's nothing in common. But over the years, raising the kids, going to work, changing jobs, people change, and maybe
Absolutely.
that commonality isn't is easy to find.
Well, let me just speak to that before I answer your question, okay? Because I find
Okay.
this is really interesting. So, in Eastern culture, there's this ongoing notion of the yin and the yang,
Hmm.
which is like light and dark, sun and moon. And we see this in marriage all the time. That's why they say opposites attract. So at the beginning of our relationship, I would have liked him because he talked a lot. He made me do exciting things. He would have liked her because she was really strong and grounded. So it's always the very opposite that brings us together. And on a biological level, on an evolutionary level, it actually sustains the human race because we need the opposites to come together to create a whole. So what does that look like in real time? I'll give you an example. uh I'm a very, well, obviously I'm the love girl, right? But I'm also very like, um glass half full, rose colored glasses, ponies and unicorns and rainbows, right? And my husband could not be the more opposite, like
Okay.
literally over here. And early on in our marriage, I would always be like, what the heck? Why you always got to judge somebody? Why you always picking on them? Like if we met a new person, he'd be like, "Oh, they're that and that and that," and I'd be like, "You're so negative," right? And here's what I learned 30 years later is that he always seen things before I did. if there was a risk coming towards our family, he would catch it far quicker than I would, because everything's lovely and people are lovely and wonderful, right? And
Oh, I
so
can relate.
again, when we talk about kind of the yin and yang, the light, the dark, the opposites
Yeah.
attract, that is how he has kept us safe through our whole marriage, right? By being the eyes that I couldn't be. But when you're 30 years, 40 years, 50 years married with these people, it gets to the point of, oh my goodness, why do they always have the opposite opinion of me? Like, if I say this is blue, they're going to say it's green. And no matter what I say to say, no, it's really blue, he's going to argue and say it's green. And the reality is, people, is that, yeah, you do see it blue, but he also sees it green. And so the answer to the question that you just asked is really about, with mature marriages or mature relationships or even early relationships, it's having a willingness and an acceptance that you can have both opinions in the relationship without him being wrong or you being right. You can both be right, you can both be wrong, right? And it's true. And so that's where the growth happens. And when I have that willingness to accept it instead of just fighting it or thinking he's always never in agreement with me, then we can grow. And then it settles from that partnership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we're friends and we're together and I respect you. My friend, I can have a beautiful friend and I can love my friend, and my friend can tell me all the things that are going wrong with them. And I'm going to say things to them like, oh, that sucks. And wow, that's really hard. And good job. And I don't know how you do it. I'm not going to say to my friend, you're wrong and that's difficult. Or you, like, because that's crappy. We're not going to be friends. So part of that, again, the deepening of that love and that relationship is a willingness to support you and love you and give empathy to your pain without telling you it's wrong and you're wrong and you shouldn't think that way.
You find with your experience in your therapy business, the couples clinic per se, um, do you find that if people talk long enough, they eventually come around to the other side, or they eventually see that there's a possibility, like you said, for both opinions, for both to be right, or they might discover that they're both wrong, rather than continuing a struggle for one to be right, one to be wrong, that they eventually will talk through, and the brain will kind of fill in all of the needed information, that they eventually come to some sense, some agreement. I won't say sense, but some agreement of recognizing the full picture as opposed to just their half.
And I would say that those are my favorite couples,
The ones that are
because
willing to talk.
those couples, and they're always the same type of people. They're willing to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
They're willing to tell the truth, and even the hard truth, like I'm falling out of love with you, or I'm not feeling sexually attracted to you, or I'm having thoughts about another person, like scary, hard, painful truth. But they're also willing to say, I messed up. I'm having mental health. I treated you poorly. I made a mistake.
Mhm.
And when they can do that, then those couples, yes, they make the connections and they spin around and heal. But
Mhm.
then we have the other couples.
Right.
And the other couples are, no, you're wrong. And no, that's not true. And no, I tried for 15 years. And no, you're, crappy. And I'm trying really
Rigid.
hard not to swear.
Well,
So,
they're very rigid, right?
yeah.
There's no give, and maybe I don't know. Maybe their mind's already made up, and it's just an exercise in futility.
Absolutely, because I'm going to be right. And here's a good point, Mary, is that, and I've seen this over and over again. It makes me crazy. It's like your desire, your need to be right over your partner is so strong that you're willing to leave your family and leave your kids and go move in and be in that single apartment and be totally alone and by yourself, and you're right. Well, how well is that working for you? Huh? Like,
Unfortunately, the damage is done before that thought kind of comes.
and I'm not talking about toxic or abusive relationships. I am
Right.
not going there with that, because that's a whole nother conversation. Because
Mhm.
no, not every marriage is meant to work out, and no, some people should not be together for sure. But the ones who want it, when we start to make changes, if you can get kind of past that 7 year period, and there, when you can get past the kids when they're little, and all of that hard work, then it's worth doing the time and working at it and investing in it.
Mhm. Well, and investing in your family, investing in your children and their future as well, because like we have both learned through our past, we are really the conduits through which our children learn about love and about self-acceptance and all that sort of thing too. So now, as I mentioned to you earlier, being an older person, there are a lot of people. I've run into a number of women. Unfortunately, men seem to die sooner, but there are a lot of women that perhaps, they're looking for companionship. They don't really know what they're looking for, and the online dating probably scares the bejeebers out of them. So in going forward and kind of maybe starting up a new relationship after maybe a successful one has ended for whatever reason, what kind of things would you advise them with regards to being on the lookout? Because can their thinking be a little distorted out of loneliness?
For sure. Again, my cup is low. And actually, it's interesting because loneliness is really one of, it's how to explain it. It's a state that is probably the lowest you can be. Like when a person goes through the initial divorce, you read all the divorce books that always say the same thing, and that is getting through the loneliness will always be the hardest part of the transition. It's killer, right?
Huh?
So there's three things I would say to that person. The first is that in order to make new relationships, okay, so we're not talking about finding a husband, finding a girlfriend, finding a boyfriend, finding a wife. It's really about finding a friendship, a companion, right? So it has to start there. And I would start with interviewing. Now, what is interviewing? That is just what you're doing, Mary. You're interviewing. You're asking me questions because something amazing happens when we ask questions to another. When a person is asked questions about themselves, they feel important. They feel like you like them because then you want to know about me. So start by asking the person that you're interested in getting to knowing, whether it's at a potluck or at a church or at a get together. Start by asking them questions, okay? And the benefit in that is that you don't have to talk a lot because they're doing the talking. You kind of just get to sit back and listen. The second thing then I would want you to do, and this is really scary, is I want you to invite them somewhere for a walk, for a coffee, to a movie, whatever you think is appropriate. Now, there's always fear when it comes to inviting, and this can be with your girlfriends too. It doesn't just mean the male population, right? Because we all need women, we all need more women in our lives. When we invite somebody, they feel appreciated, they feel wanted. Just go through the Rolodex in your mind. Think of any time somebody's invited you anywhere. Did you think, oh, how awful, how terrible? Oh, you thought that's what? That somebody's invited me somewhere.
Yeah.
So you've got to be good at inviting somebody. Okay. So interview one. Second, invite them. If you feel like that chemistry, like there's something a little there, right? The
Well, you
little
want to
energy.
spend time with them.
Yeah. And then the third and the most important of them all is to know your worth. Okay? Make sure that whoever is ever sitting at your table is worthy of sitting at your table. And often, where women, and it does not matter your age, you're 15 or 50 or 95, is that, oh, they're sitting with me and they're sitting at my table and they're paying attention to me. And okay, sure, they just said something crappy, or maybe they just put down my kids, or maybe they said something really creepy racist. Oh, what does it matter? Or maybe they need me, or I need to fix them, or no. If they're sitting at your table, then they need to be worthy of sitting at your table, no matter what age you are. And if they are not worthy, then do not spend one more ounce of energy. There are a billion more people to interview and invite to be sitting at your table. And don't be afraid to go, oh, not a good match. And
Yeah.
that's okay too.
Yeah, that's not necessarily a reflection of you not living up to somebody else. It's a
Mm-mm.
matter of you um, giving yourself the worth, the respect that we deserve. Do you
Mhm.
find that sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's like, well, I don't know, like playing a game where, you know, you've got to figure out the value of something, that, you know, you're going to put up with something because you know, it's better than the opposite. So some people I've heard would rather um, put themselves in a relationship that might not be, um, you know, validating for them, rather than the alternative of going home alone all the time. Are they more vulnerable? I mean, we need to have our eyes wide open and our ears too. What kind of red flags should someone be thinking about? Like, in terms of, if there's any disrespect, that would be definitely one of them, right?
Three things, and the most important of all, it's actually the thing I teach in the first couples therapy session, always, always, always. And it's this: if you are sick, if you are scared, I have anxiety, I'm really worried, or you are hurt, I'm sad, I'm hurting, I'm depressed. So if you're in those three states and he gets angry, are you kidding me? Annoyed, just figure it out. Or he shuts down and withdraws, I don't know what to do. Those are always red flags. If he is demanding that you are pouring into his cup and it's about him and not about you, that's a red flag. And most importantly, as human beings, we're really no different than the animals, the millions of animals that surround us. And all animals are so much better with their intuition than human beings. But we have that capacity. And if you feel your stomach tighten and your heart hurt, don't ignore it. Right? Don't say your body's going to scream at you and let you know something is wrong. Don't go, well, don't, I'm not listening to your body. Listen to your body. It will always tell you the truth.
That's a really good point, because we have that anxiety in us, and it can be very healthy. Not all anxiety is harmful to us. Some of it is just like bells going or red lights flashing and whatnot. In your therapy business, um, is there a common age, or length of time married, that might be what you see as maybe the most difficult to kind of persevere through?
I would say the probably the early years, the first 7 years when we're just kind of that forming and norming before we get to the storming part, when we got little kids. And I mean, women these days, certainly since the 60s, I mean, and it's just so normal that women do everything. Although, again, I would say, Mary, the younger generation's getting better than this. When 20-year-olds come in to see me, they have equal share of the housework and equal share of the children work. It's the people in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s where it's still messed, okay? But you still have these women who are working all day at work and then coming home and working all day at night. What was your question again?
I was just wondering if there was an age or a
Oh, right,
time
right.
in a person's life.
So it's those early years, but then when the kids go, that's why
Right.
we have the gray divorce, right? Because now I don't even know who you are. I've been working so hard in this life, and I've devoted so much time into my career and my children and raising a home. And now that all of those things are gone, you're a stranger to me. And I don't even know who you are. And then you see a lot of gray divorce happening massively because they think that
Imagine,
maybe I can have better or more.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I would imagine that you would be a very strong advocate for date night of
Oh,
married couples.
I think, and touch. Touch
Oh,
is love. Love is energy. And I don't, and ladies, it's not just about intercourse, right? It's about cuddling. Like,
mhm.
let's bring cuddling back, right? Let's bring spooning back. I always say, and this is something, even ladies, if you don't even know where to start, because ladies typically, especially us 45, 65, right, where the libido changes on you, and there's decreases, right? But when mamas have their babies in the hospital, the nurse always puts the baby up on the chest, and there's a good reason, because what happens, and we know this for sure, is that the hearts sync up. Okay. It's the first, we both release oxytocin hormones, and it's the first step in attachment between mother and child. But the same thing can happen with your partner. So if he's laying in bed snoring, and you're like, I'm gonna love you whether you like it or not. I want you to crawl in bed and get behind him and spoon with him and align the front of your heart to his back. And even though he might not even know it, your hearts are automatically going to sync and line up. So we can bring in touch in a bunch of different ways. And initiating touch, whether it's hand holding, hugging, kissing, and if he doesn't like it, then maybe having a conversation, because it's okay to evolve and change. And it's okay if maybe he doesn't like it, but your needs are increasing. You got to be honest about it, women.
What do you think? This is a doozy. Um,
I
I
love you.
didn't tell you this, but I've had two marriages, and then my last husband, which was the best ever. He was the one that ended up passing away, which was seemed very unfair. But how do you kind of start a difficult conversation? Like, your heart beats fast, you get, your breath caught in your throat, and you want to say something, and it's hard, right? How do
Yeah.
you kind of bite the bullet and just start the conversation without starting a war?
It's a good question. So I'll phrase it this way. The vast majority of women, actually 85% of all women, are verbal processors. That means that they always want to talk it out and they want to talk about it now. But the reality is that 85% of men are cognitive processors. That means they need to pull back and think it through. That's why so many men are withdrawers. So instead of just, if you need to start a difficult conversation, because your chances are you're probably married to a cognitive processor, start by giving him a heads up. Hey, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z. Can we do that tomorrow night? Is he going to want to talk about it? Oh, never. But giving him a heads up allows him to think about what's going on. Less drama. Men don't like all the fire and the drama that women bring. They would rather be X, Y, and Z, A to B, right? It's far more simpler. Men tend to think of grids and lines. Women are more like spaghetti brain. Everything's connected. So when you have that conversation, get to the point. No shame, no blame, no guilt. I feel X when you do Y. I would like X in the future, and making it clear. Allow him to disagree with you. Allow him to not feel comfortable with your opinion, because it's okay. That's how we start change. Try hard not to cry if you can. It helps.
Yeah, what's with that? Why do men just go crazy when a woman cries? What's with that?
I gotta get. Can I tell you a story?
Sure.
Okay, so this is where it starts. So let's pretend we've got two 6-year-olds at a baseball game. We'll call them Jack and call them Jill. Jill walks up to the baseball bat, and she goes to swing and she misses 3 times. Jill gets mad. And what the message Jill gets is, stop that. You're being a brat. Go sit down. But if Jill cries, oh, honey, it's okay. You'll do better. Go sit down. Jack comes up to the plate. He misses. What do you think happens if 6-year-old Jack starts to cry?
Oh, it's told to toughen up and get over it.
Yeah, you're a baby and probably a lot worse. But if Jack gets mad, oh, come on, Slugger, you're fine. Head up, you'll be fine. So, right from the time we are tiny, tiny people, men are socialized that the only way to release their pain is to get angry, and that tears are for losers. And women are taught that the only way to release our pain is to cry, and that anger is bad. And boy, does that not set us up for future conflict in the future. So when you're trying to have that tough conversation, being aware of those things, and then start small, implement little tiny practices, and be willing to draw boundaries of what you're not willing to deal with. Don't come in like an autocratic, that'll never work. And that's not love, right? That's not respectful.
Good answer. And it's
Thank
funny, we've become so much more aware of our personal development and our well-being, and yet still the male female reaction to things is still carrying on, um, quite on the playground, probably on a regular basis, right? I often have thought that we don't want to start the conversation, and we tend to, I think they refer to it as maybe swallowing our emotions, and then they talk about sometimes it ends up with the overeating issues or whatever. That is it does it get easier with practice, I guess, is my question. Like, if you are trying to bring yourself forward to have those discussions, is there a promise or a hope that it's going to get a little bit easier each time you do it?
It does. But just like starting a diet or a workout routine, first time's always the toughest, right? It's always hard.
Yeah,
I even think about in my, so I'm married 30 years. I have four adult children, one grandchild, and I have three of my adult children currently still in the home because it's 2023 and rent is 1,700 for one bedroom apartment.
right.
Crazy.
Yes.
Um, so one of the things, even as a mother and a wife in my own family, I've had to learn is letting go of cooking meals. And I made that choice. And it was a really hard choice because I was bathing in guilt about it. But then I was like making food for my family with a lot of resentment. And I'm probably sending a lot of like pain and bad feelings into that food that I was feeding my family. And so I made a decision and drew a boundary that you're all old enough, you're all grown ups, you can feed yourself. I'm not doing this anymore. And the benefit, here's the benefit, okay? The benefit in that me laying this boundary and taking back my time, even though it was uncomfortable for me to do that and it was hard and I felt really guilty for a long time, is two things. Number one is that I started feeding myself the way I wanted to feed myself rather than all these people. And second is I lost 50 pounds. Woo woo. So
That
it
doesn't
was,
help me, Ronnie. I'm all by myself.
oh, I had to start somewhere.
That's true. True enough. That's great. Yeah. Um, and I mean, I really see a lot of older women inclined to want to take care of the adult children. And I think maybe we don't do any favors for them by not letting them step up and be adults. Um, I live with my oldest son, and I made it very, very clear. It's just temporary. It's been 5 years, but it's temporary because I get in my van and I travel. So I'm not here all the time. And it's nice. Sometimes, of course, talk about the food thing. Sometimes I want a pizza, but I don't want the whole thing. I just want to taste. So it was kind of easy, just say, okay, I'll order in, I'll get mine, and then you have the rest, and I got my taste for the time. Go down and cook him dinner every night. Of course, now he's engaged and getting married, so I'm sort of not that person anymore. But to go downstairs and cook for him would not have been a good thing for him. And I usually say to him, make sure that you tell anybody that your mother lives with you, that you don't live with your mother, because at our ages, it really is kind of significant. But in terms of having a relationship, there's also, like the adult relationship with our children and things like that, which you've touched on. And it's kind of like, I guess it encompasses the same kind of things you're just talking about, with like setting the boundaries and your own worth, and, like providing a meal that you resent doesn't help anybody.
No, no,
So
it
that
doesn't.
that's a great thing to bring up, that don't do something out of guilt or resentment, that there's other ways of getting through a process that benefits everybody.
Yeah. For sure. It's hard. The relationship with our kids definitely does change over the years. And it's always hard knowing where that boundary is because us women, we have so much of our worth in our mother role because we were told as children when we were handed a doll that it would be the most important thing we do. Turns out it is, but it isn't. Like there's
Yeah.
other things too. We have value in other places other than our role model, our mother role. Now, it's here's where it gets really interesting for me, Mary, is that when I was young, and I imagine even more when you were younger, kids left early. Like, I
Yes.
mean, women got pregnant at 15 and married, like, and then even because I remember even when I was young, kind of feeling guilty. Older people would be like, I left school in grade 8 and I worked full time. And like the
Yes.
message to me was, oh, is maybe I'm supposed to leave at grade 8? Now, luckily, by the time I became a teenager, it was more natural to actually finish and get a high school diploma, but not
Right.
100%. And now, when we fast forward to 2023, you have a very different idea of people are parenting their children much, much longer.
Yes.
And because there's this reliance in our 50s and our 60s of taking care of our kids, it's like, am I bad to make them be on their own? 50 years ago, we would have been crazy for taking care of our 30-year-old children, but now it's 100% the norm.
The
And
circumstances are so different too, right?
for sure,
The
for sure.
economy, the life, and everything. Like I left home when I was almost 19. My first son was born when I was just a couple of months before I turned 21. And so I had my four children and I was all done by the time I was 27. So yeah, it is very, people, the young women today are waiting for mid 30s, maybe. Anyway, Ronnie, I think relationships are challenging and they're not something to take lightly. And if people think that it's just something we jump into when it works and then jump out of when it's uncomfortable, um, they're doing everybody a disservice, including themselves. It's something that we need to work at. So, do you just do couples therapy or counseling? Do you do other individuals, or tell us a little bit about your business in Sarnia. We've got a few minutes here, so tell us about what you do for your business.
Well, I actually am in the process of launching a second business. So the
Okay.
last 7 years, I've run a group practice in Sarnia to help couples and individuals. We do both in person and online, anywhere in Ontario, where they can connect to one of our counselors, and they very much teach about some of the things that I've been talking about.
Hmm.
But really, I'm on a personal mission. I'm on a life mission. It's crazy, to save 1 million marriages. And you kind of got to be crazy to want to do
I
something
think
that
that's
big.
amazing. That's amazing.
So I'm kind of also putting on a life coach hat and moving away from my therapy roots and launching a second business called 1 Million Marriages Saved. You can find that on Facebook or on Instagram, on YouTube, and really about teaching people how to love not only themselves but others. And that's it. If I can leave this world knowing that I at least touched some lives of teaching people how to love, then I will know, regardless if it's a million or not, I've met my mission.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like a very worthy purpose. You know your value, and you have your work cut out for you, with a willing heart, no doubt. And thank you so much for taking the time today to share with your expertise and your viewpoints. And I really hope that through even my podcast that it'll the ripple effect. I always believe in the ripple effect. So as I do, don't die before you're dead. Get out there and live life. Get out of the house, get out of the couch, go do something. um, Life is to be meant to be lived, and I think in terms of having your mission to go out, and not only are you saving couples in a marriage or a relationship, but the families and the grandchildren, like it just the ripple effect that you will create will be pretty awesome. I can't wait to see where it's going. So that's 1 million marriages. Is
One
that the
million
number
marriages,
one or the
no,
word?
it's number 1 million marriages saved.
Saved. Okay, we'll look for that. And thank you again, Ronnie. I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And I look forward to following you and seeing what you're up to over the next while.
Well,
So
thank you,
take
Mary, for
care.
having me. Take care.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us and listening in today. It's Mary McCartney with Don't Die Before You're Dead. And I always say, do what you can while you can for as long as you can, and get out there and live the best life you can. See you next time.